The sun was setting over London, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. The city buzzed with life as tourists from all corners of the world gathered near Buckingham Palace to witness one of its most iconic traditions, the changing of the guard ceremony. Among the crowd stood Emma, a young traveler from Canada who had dreamed of visiting this historic place for years. Emma had always been fascinated by history and culture. For her, traveling wasn't just about seeing new places, it was about connecting with people and understanding their stories. She carried a small notebook in her bag where she jotted down thoughts, feelings, and observations from her journeys. Today, she hoped to capture something special, something unforgettable. As the clock struck 11, the sound of marching boots echoed through the air. The royal guards appeared, dressed in their striking red uniforms and tall black bearskin hats. The crowd erupted into applause, cameras clicking furiously as the soldiers moved with precision and discipline. Emma watched intently, her eyes scanning each face behind those stoic expressions. One guard caught her attention more than the others. His name was Corporal James Whittaker, though Emma didn't know that yet. He stood taller than the rest, his posture perfect, his gaze fixed straight ahead. But there was something in his eyes, a flicker of sadness, that made Emma pause. Most people saw only the uniform, but Emma saw beyond it. She wondered what lay beneath the surface of this man who seemed so strong yet distant. James, on the other hand, felt nothing but numbness. To him, this wasn't just a job. It was a duty he performed every day without fail. Yet lately, his heart felt heavy. A few months ago, his younger brother Daniel had died in a car accident. Daniel had been full of laughter and energy, the kind of person who could light up any room. Losing him left a void in James's life that no amount of training or protocol could fill. Standing there under the watchful eyes of hundreds of tourists, James tried to focus on his role. But deep inside, he felt trapped, not by the weight of his uniform, but by the pain he carried within. Every time he looked at the crowd, he imagined Daniel standing there, smiling and waving like he used to when they were kids. Those memories haunted him, even as he maintained his rigid stance. Emma couldn't shake off the feeling that this particular guard needed something, or someone, to remind him that he was human. As the ceremony continued, she found herself inching closer to him, drawn by an inexplicable pull. Her mind raced with questions. What is he thinking? Does he miss home? Is he happy here? When the ceremony ended, the crowd began to disperse. Some tourists lingered, taking selfies with the palace in the background, while others headed toward nearby cafes and shops. Emma stayed put, her eyes still fixed on James. Signs around the area clearly stated, "Do not touch the guards," but Emma felt a strange urge to break the rule. She remembered reading articles about soldiers struggling with mental health issues. Many of them returned from war zones or demanding roles carrying invisible scars. Could this guard be one of them? Was he silently fighting battles no one else could see? Her heart told her to act, even if it meant risking embarrassment or trouble. Slowly, she approached James, her steps hesitant but determined. The noise around them faded as Emma focused solely on the figure before her. When she was close enough, she extended her arms and wrapped them gently around him. For a moment, everything froze. The chatter of the crowd stopped. Cameras clicked even faster now, capturing the unexpected scene. James stiffened, unsure how to react. No one had touched him like this in years, not since Daniel's death. It was such a simple gesture, yet it felt monumental. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to feel something other than emptiness. Emma held the hug for only a few seconds before stepping back. She looked up at James, her expression soft and sincere. "I'm sorry if I broke any rules," she said quietly, "but I wanted to remind you that you're not alone." James didn't say anything. He couldn't. His training taught him to remain silent and composed, but inside, emotions swirled like a storm. Memories of Daniel flooded his mind. His laugh, his jokes, the way he used to hug James tightly whenever he was feeling down. In that brief moment, James felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe he wasn't as broken as he thought. The crowd reacted in different ways. Some people clapped, moved by the unexpected display of kindness. Others shook their heads, whispering about how inappropriate it was to touch a royal guard. Social media lit up almost instantly, with videos of the hug spreading across platforms. People debated whether Emma's actions were disrespectful or courageous. Meanwhile, Emma walked away, her heart pounding. She didn't know what would happen next, but she felt certain of one thing. She had followed her instincts, and that was enough. Back at his post, James resumed his position, his face unreadable. But as the minutes passed, he realized something had changed. That hug hadn't just surprised him. It had awakened something inside him. For the first time in months, he felt alive again. The ceremony had ended, and the crowd around Buckingham Palace was beginning to thin out. Tourists wandered off in search of food or souvenirs, while others lingered nearby, snapping photos of the iconic building before heading back to their hotels. But Emma wasn't ready to leave just yet. She stood a few feet away from Corporal James Whittaker, her mind replaying the image of him standing so still, so silent. Something about his presence tugged at her heart. It wasn't just the uniform or the discipline. It was the sadness she thought she saw in his eyes. She couldn't explain it, but it felt like he needed someone to remind him that he was more than just a guard. Emma glanced at the signs posted around the area. "Do not touch the guards," they read in bold letters. She knew the rules were clear, but deep down, she felt an urge to break them. To her, this wasn't about disrespecting tradition. It was about reaching out to another human being who might be struggling silently. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag as she wrestled with her thoughts. What if I embarrass myself? What if he gets angry? What if security comes after me? These questions buzzed in her head like restless bees. But then she remembered why she traveled, to connect with people, to understand their stories, and sometimes, to make a difference, no matter how small. Taking a deep breath, Emma stepped forward. The noise around her faded into a soft hum as she focused solely on the figure before her. James stood tall and unmoving, his gaze fixed straight ahead as though nothing else existed. His posture was perfect, his expression unreadable. Yet Emma saw something beneath the surface, a quiet pain that seemed to echo her own loneliness at times. When she reached him, she hesitated for just a moment. Then, without thinking too much, she wrapped her arms gently around him. The hug lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. For James, time seemed to stop. At first, he froze, unsure of what was happening. No one had touched him like this since Daniel's death. The warmth of Emma's embrace was unfamiliar, almost startling. He wanted to step back, to maintain his composure, but something stopped him. Instead, he let himself feel, really feel, for the first time in months. Memories of his brother flooded his mind. Daniel used to hug him tightly whenever he was feeling low, whispering words of encouragement until James smiled again. Those hugs had been a lifeline during tough times. Now, standing there in the middle of Buckingham Palace, James felt a piece of that comfort return. For a brief moment, the walls he had built around himself crumbled, and he allowed himself to be human again. The crowd gasped audibly. Some people clapped, moved by the unexpected act of kindness. Others whispered among themselves, debating whether Emma's actions were appropriate or disrespectful. Cameras flashed, capturing every angle of the scene. Within minutes, videos of the hug began circulating online, sparking heated discussions across social media. Emma stepped back quickly, her cheeks flushed. She looked up at James, her expression filled with sincerity. "I'm sorry if I broke any rules," she said softly, "but I wanted to remind you that you're not alone." James didn't respond. His training taught him to remain silent and composed, even in moments like this. But inside, emotions swirled like a storm. He felt gratitude, confusion, and a strange sense of relief all at once. He watched as Emma turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. The crowd reacts. As Emma left, the spectators erupted into chatter. A group of teenagers giggled nervously, saying things like, "That was crazy. And did she really just do that?" An older couple nearby shook their heads disapprovingly. "It's disrespectful," the man muttered. "They're here to serve, not to be hugged." Others, however, took a different view. A young mother holding her child's hand smiled warmly. "I think it was beautiful," she said to her husband. "Sometimes we forget that these guards are people too." Maybe she reminded him of that. Social media amplified the reactions. Videos of the hug went viral within hours, with hashtags like #HughForHope and #KindnessOverRules trending worldwide. Opinions were divided. Some praised Emma for her courage and compassion, calling her a symbol of humanity in a rigid world. Others criticized her for breaking protocol and disrespecting tradition. Comments poured in from all corners of the globe. One user wrote, "I've never seen anything like this. It's amazing how a simple hug can spark such a big conversation." Another added, "We need more kindness like this in the world. Rules are important, but so is empathy." Despite the mixed reactions, one thing was clear. Emma's bold move had touched a nerve. People everywhere were talking about the balance between tradition and compassion, duty and humanity. For many, the hug became a reminder that even in structured environments like Buckingham Palace, there is room for connection. Emma reflects. Back at her hostel later that evening, Emma scrolled through her phone, overwhelmed by the attention her actions had received. Friends and strangers alike had tagged her in posts and videos of the hug. Messages poured in, ranging from supportive to critical. Some called her brave, while others accused her of seeking fame. At first, Emma felt nervous. Had she crossed a line? Should she have respected the rules instead of following her instincts? But as she read through the comments, she noticed a common thread. Many people shared personal stories of loss, loneliness, and struggles with mental health. They thanked her for reminding them that small acts of kindness could mean the world to someone in need. One message stood out to her. It read, "Your hug reminded me of my dad, who served in the military. He always said soldiers carry invisible burdens. Thank you for seeing that and doing something about it." Emma smiled, feeling a sense of purpose wash over her. She realized that her intention hadn't been to challenge tradition or gain attention. It had simply been to offer comfort. And if her gesture had sparked conversations about empathy and understanding, then maybe it was worth it. She opened her notebook and began writing. "Today, I hugged a royal guard," she wrote. "I don't know his name, but I saw sadness in his eyes. I hope he knows he's not alone." Sometimes, all it takes is a moment of courage to make a difference. James reflects. Meanwhile, back at the barracks, James sat alone in his room, staring at the wall. The day's events replayed in his mind like a movie he couldn't turn off. He kept thinking about the hug, the warmth, the familiarity, the way it had made him feel alive again. For weeks, he had pushed his emotions aside, focusing solely on his duties. But now, those feelings came rushing back. He thought about Daniel and how much he missed him. He also thought about Emma, the stranger who had dared to reach out when no one else had. James picked up a pen and paper, something he rarely did. Writing wasn't part of his routine, but tonight, he felt compelled to put his thoughts into words. Slowly, he began to write. "Dear stranger, thank you for your kindness today. I don't know your name, but your hug reminded me of my brother, who used to comfort me when I was sad. You made me feel human again, even if it was just for a moment. I'll never forget it." He folded the letter carefully and placed it in his drawer. It wasn't meant for anyone to read, at least not yet, but writing it helped him process everything he had been holding inside. A ripple effect. By the next morning, the story of the hug had spread even further. News outlets picked it up, turning Emma's spontaneous act into a global phenomenon. People started leaving flowers and notes at Buckingham Palace, honoring soldiers everywhere and expressing gratitude for their service. The hug had become a symbol of connection, reminding everyone that behind every uniform is a person with hopes, fears, and dreams. For James, the experience marked a turning point. Though he continued to fulfill his duties with pride, he began to open up more, to his fellow guards, to his family, and eventually to himself. The hug had shown him that it was okay to feel, to grieve, and to seek help when needed. And for Emma, the journey was just beginning. Little did she know, her small act of kindness would lead to opportunities she never imagined, bringing her closer to people whose lives she had unknowingly touched. The morning after the hug, Emma woke up to a flood of notifications on her phone. Her social media accounts were buzzing with messages, tags, and comments. At first, she thought it was a mistake. Maybe someone had shared a photo of her without realizing it. But as she scrolled through her feed, reality hit her like a wave. Videos of the hug had gone viral overnight, sparking debates all over the world. Some people praised her for her boldness, calling her a symbol of compassion in a rigid system. Others criticized her harshly, accusing her of disrespecting tradition and breaking sacred rules. The mixed reactions left Emma feeling torn between pride and doubt. Had she done the right thing? Or had she crossed a line that shouldn't have been crossed? The online storm. Social media platforms were ablaze with discussions about the hug. On Twitter, hashtags like #WhoForHope and #RulesSkinness dominated the trending list. One video of the moment had millions of views, with thousands of comments pouring in every hour. People from different countries weighed in, sharing their opinions passionately. A young woman from Australia wrote, "I think what she did was beautiful. Soldiers are humans too, and they carry invisible burdens. Sometimes, all it takes is one kind act to remind them they're not alone." But not everyone agreed. A man from the UK commented, "It's disrespectful. These guards are there to protect and serve, not to be hugged by random tourists. She should have known better." Even news outlets picked up the story, turning Emma's spontaneous act into a global conversation. Headlines ranged from "Tourists' bold hug sparks debate" to "Compassion or controversy." The Buckingham Palace incident. Some journalists focused on the emotional impact of the hug, while others questioned whether tradition should always take priority over humanity. Emma read through the comments carefully, trying to understand both sides of the argument. She noticed that many people who supported her shared personal stories of loss or struggles with mental health. They thanked her for reminding them that kindness could make a difference, even in unexpected places. On the other hand, critics argued that rules were put in place for a reason. What if everyone started hugging the guards? One commenter asked, "Where do we draw the line between respect and chaos?" Despite the backlash, Emma couldn't ignore the outpouring of love and support she received. Messages poured in from strangers saying things like, "Your courage inspires me," and "Thank you for reminding us to be kind, even when it's hard." Reading those words gave her strength, but she still felt uneasy knowing that some people saw her actions as wrong. James's struggle. Back at the barracks, Corporal James Whittaker sat silently in his room, replaying the events of the previous day in his mind. The hug had shaken him more than he cared to admit. For years, he had prided himself on his discipline and composure. Yet, in that brief moment, he had let his guard down, literally and figuratively. His fellow guards hadn't said much about the incident, but James could feel their eyes on him whenever he walked past. He knew they must have seen the videos online, just like everyone else. Some of them avoided him, while others gave him knowing looks, as if waiting for him to explain himself. James didn't know what to say. How could he put into words what he had felt during that hug? It wasn't just about the physical contact. It was about the emotions it stirred within him. Memories of his brother Daniel came rushing back, along with the pain of losing him. For the first time in months, James allowed himself to grieve openly. He opened his drawer and pulled out the letter he had written the night before. Reading it again brought tears to his eyes. He realized that Emma's gesture had done more than just surprise him. It had awakened something inside him. It had reminded him that he was human, that it was okay to feel, and that he wasn't alone in his struggles. Still, James wrestled with guilt. Part of him wondered if he should have stepped away immediately, maintaining his professional distance. But another part of him, a deeper, quieter part, knew that the hug had been meaningful. It had broken through the walls he had built around himself, forcing him to confront the pain he had been avoiding. Public reaction at Buckingham Palace. In the days following the incident, something remarkable happened outside Buckingham Palace. Tourists began leaving flowers, notes, and small tokens of appreciation near the gates. The messages were heartfelt and varied. To the brave soldiers who stand tall every day, thank you for your service. Behind every uniform is a person with feelings. Never forget that. From one stranger to another, your sacrifices matter. These gestures touched not only the guards, but also visitors who passed by. Many stopped to read the notes, taking photos and reflecting on the power of empathy. What had started as a single act of kindness had grown into a movement, a reminder that compassion transcended boundaries, even in the most formal settings. For James, seeing the flowers and notes was bittersweet. On one hand, he felt grateful for the recognition. On the other, he struggled with the attention, knowing that his role required him to remain stoic and detached. Still, he couldn't deny the warmth he felt when he read the messages. Each one seemed to say, "You are seen. You are valued." Emma's reflections. As the days went by, Emma found herself thinking more deeply about the hug and its impact. She realized that her small act had sparked conversations about important topics like mental health, empathy, and the balance between tradition and humanity. It made her wonder how often people overlook the individuals behind symbols of authority, the soldiers, police officers, and firefighters who served their communities daily. One evening, sitting in her hostel room, Emma decided to write a public post explaining her side of the story. She wanted to address the criticism and share her intentions honestly. Opening her laptop, she typed, "Hi everyone. I know my actions have caused a lot of debate, and I want to clarify why I did what I did. Yesterday, I visited Buckingham Palace and witnessed the changing of the guard ceremony. As I watched one particular guard, I sensed a deep sadness in his eyes. I don't know his name or his story, but I felt compelled to remind him that he's more than just his uniform, that he's human, just like the rest of us. Yes, I broke the rules by hugging him, and I understand why some people are upset. But I truly believe that sometimes rules need to be bent for the sake of compassion. We live in a world where people often suffer in silence, especially those in positions of duty and responsibility. My hug wasn't meant to disrespect anyone. It was meant to offer comfort, even if only for a moment. To the guard, wherever you are, I hope you know that your strength and resilience inspires so many people, including me. And to everyone reading this, I encourage you to look beyond appearances and see the humanity in others. Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can create the biggest ripples. When Emma hit post, she felt a mix of relief and anxiety. Would people understand her perspective, or would they continue to criticize her? Within minutes, her inbox filled with responses. Many thanked her for speaking up, saying her words resonated deeply with them. Others remained critical, but their voices seemed quieter now, drowned out by the overwhelming support. A global conversation. The post reignited the online conversation, shifting the focus from blame to understanding. People began sharing their own experiences of reaching out to strangers in need. A teacher from Canada wrote about comforting a student who seemed lonely. A doctor from India talked about holding a patient's hand during a difficult diagnosis. Even members of the military joined the discussion, sharing stories of moments when simple acts of kindness had made a difference in their lives. Slowly, the narrative changed. Instead of focusing solely on Emma's actions, people started talking about the importance of empathy in everyday life. Schools used the incident as a teaching moment, encouraging students to think about how they could spread kindness in their communities. Businesses incorporated the story into team-building exercises, emphasizing the value of connection and understanding. For James, reading Emma's post was a turning point. Her honesty and vulnerability resonated with him, reminding him that he wasn't alone in his struggles. With permission from his superiors, he decided to respond publicly, hoping to add his voice to the conversation. James speaks out. Using an official channel set up by the British Army, James wrote a short message addressed to Emma and the world. Dear Emma, thank you for your kindness and bravery. Your hug reminded me of my brother, who used to comfort me when I was sad. For a brief moment, I felt alive again, even amidst the weight of my duties. You showed me that it's okay to feel, to grieve, and to seek help when needed. To everyone reading this, please remember that soldiers are people too. We carry burdens, joys, and sorrows, just like anyone else. Your support means more than words can express. Thank you for reminding us that behind every uniform is a human heart. The response was overwhelming. People applauded James for his courage in speaking out, praising him as a role model for breaking the stigma around mental health in the military. His words inspired countless others to open up about their own struggles, creating a ripple effect of healing and connection. A new perspective. By the end of the week, the initial controversy had transformed into a celebration of humanity. The hug that had once divided opinions now united people across cultures and backgrounds. It became a symbol of empathy, reminding everyone that even in structured environments like Buckingham Palace, there was room for compassion. For Emma, the experience reinforced her belief in the power of small actions. She realized that kindness didn't have to be grand or dramatic to make an impact. It just had to come from the heart. And for James, the hug marked the beginning of a journey toward healing. He learned that vulnerability wasn't a weakness. It was a strength that allowed him to connect with others on a deeper level. Together, their stories proved that sometimes the simplest gestures could spark the most profound change. Months had passed since the day Emma hugged Corporal James Whittaker outside Buckingham Palace. The incident, once a fleeting moment of compassion, had grown into something much larger. A global conversation about kindness, mental health, and the humanity behind uniforms. For Emma and James, life had changed in ways they never expected. Emma returned to Canada after her trip, carrying with her a sense of fulfillment, but also curiosity. She often wondered how James was doing. Had her hug truly made a difference, or had it been forgotten amidst the chaos of daily life? Meanwhile, James continued his duties as a royal guard, though he felt different now. Lighter, somehow. The hug had opened a door within him, allowing emotions he had long suppressed to surface. He started seeing himself not just as a soldier, but as a person with feelings, dreams, and vulnerabilities. Little did either of them know that their paths would cross again in an unexpected way. An invitation. One morning, Emma received an email from a British charity organization called Hearts Behind Helmets. The subject line read, "You're invited." Intrigued, she opened the message. Inside, she found an invitation to speak at a special event in London focused on supporting veterans' mental health. The organizers explained that her act of kindness during the changing of the guard ceremony had inspired countless people worldwide. They wanted her to share her story and encourage others to practice empathy in their own lives. Emma's heart raced as she read the email. She hadn't anticipated that her small gesture would lead to such an opportunity. At first, she hesitated. Public speaking wasn't her strong suit, and she worried about being judged for stepping out of her comfort zone. But then she remembered why she had hugged James in the first place, to remind him that he mattered. If sharing her experience could help even one person feel less alone, she knew she had to accept the invitation. She replied to the email, confirming her attendance. As she packed her bags and prepared for the trip back to London, she couldn't help but wonder if she'd see James again. James steps forward. On the other side of the Atlantic, James received a letter from his commanding officer. It contained an invitation similar to Emma's, to attend the same charity event as a guest speaker. The organizers praised his courage in responding publicly to Emma's hug and expressed hope that his story would inspire other soldiers to seek help when needed. At first, James felt uneasy about accepting the invitation. Speaking in front of a large audience wasn't part of his usual routine. He preferred staying in the background, quietly fulfilling his duties without drawing attention to himself. But deep down, he knew this was an opportunity to make a difference. His response to Emma's hug had already started conversations about mental health among his fellow guards. Now, he had a chance to amplify those discussions on a bigger stage. With some encouragement from his family and friends, James agreed to participate. He spent weeks preparing his speech, pouring his heart into every word. He wrote about losing his brother Daniel, the pain of carrying invisible burdens, and the moment Emma's hug reminded him what it meant to be human. By the time the event approached, he felt ready, or at least as ready as he could be. The reunion. The night of the event arrived, and the venue was packed with attendees. Soldiers, veterans, families, and supporters filled the room, eager to hear stories of resilience and connection. Photographers snapped pictures, reporters jotted notes, and volunteers handed out programs detailing the evening's agenda. Emma arrived early, nervous but excited. She wore a simple yet elegant dress and carried her trusty notebook, filled with thoughts and reflections from her travels. As she mingled with guests, she overheard snippets of conversations about her hug. Some people recognized her immediately, thanking her for inspiring them to spread kindness in their own lives. Others simply smiled warmly, nodding in acknowledgement. Meanwhile, James stood backstage, pacing nervously. He adjusted his tie for the 100th time, trying to calm his racing mind. When the host announced his name, he took a deep breath and walked onto the stage. The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers echoing through the hall. James scanned the audience, searching for familiar faces. And then he saw her, Emma, sitting near the front, smiling up at him. Their eyes met, and for a moment, everything else faded away. James felt a surge of gratitude and relief. This was the woman who had unknowingly changed his life. Without her boldness, he might still be trapped in his own silence, unable to confront his grief. Sharing their stories. The program began with speeches from various speakers, each sharing their experiences of overcoming adversity. When it was Emma's turn to take the stage, she stepped forward confidently, holding her notebook close. She greeted the audience with a warm smile before beginning her story. "Hello, everyone," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "My name is Emma, and I'm just an ordinary traveler who believes in the power of small acts of kindness. A few months ago, I visited London and witnessed the changing of the guard ceremony. One particular guard caught my attention, not because of his uniform, but because of the sadness I thought I saw in his eyes." She paused, looking directly at James. I didn't know his name or his story, but I felt drawn to him. So I did something spontaneous. I hugged him. It wasn't planned, and I didn't know how he would react. All I knew was that I wanted to remind him that he wasn't alone. The audience listened intently, hanging on her every word. Emma continued, "Since that day, I've learned that my actions sparked conversations about mental health, empathy, and the importance of seeing people beyond their roles. I want to thank all of you for embracing this message and using it to create positive change." When Emma finished speaking, the crowd gave her a standing ovation. Tears welled up in her eyes as she returned to her seat, feeling proud of the impact her words had made. Next, it was James's turn. He walked back onto the stage, clutching his notes tightly. Taking a deep breath, he began. "Thank you all for being here tonight. My name is Corporal James Whittaker, and I'm honored to stand before you as both a soldier and a person. For years, I prided myself on my discipline and composure. But beneath the surface, I carried a heavy burden, the loss of my younger brother, Daniel." His voice cracked slightly as he spoke about Daniel's death and the emptiness he had felt ever since. Then, one day, a stranger reminded me what it means to feel alive again. Emma's hug broke through the walls I had built around myself, forcing me to confront my pain. It taught me that vulnerability isn't a weakness, it's a strength. James went on to talk about the importance of seeking help and supporting one another. He encouraged soldiers and civilians alike to open up about their struggles, emphasizing that no one should have to face their battles alone. When he concluded his speech, the audience rose to their feet, applauding loudly. Many wiped away tears, moved by his honesty and courage. A new friendship. After the event ended, Emma and James finally met face to face. They shook hands warmly, their earlier nervousness replaced by mutual respect and admiration. Then, without hesitation, Emma hugged James again, this time with permission. "I can't believe we're meeting like this," Emma said, laughing softly. "I've thought about you so many times since that day." James smiled, his expression softer than Emma had ever seen it. "I've thought about you too," he admitted. "Your hug changed everything for me. Thank you." They spent the rest of the evening talking, sharing stories, and reflecting on the journey that had brought them together. Though they came from different worlds, they discovered they had much in common. Both valued kindness, empathy, and the belief that small actions could create big changes. As they parted ways later that night, Emma handed James a copy of her notebook. "Here," she said, "it's got some thoughts I've written down along the way. Maybe it'll inspire you." James accepted the gift gratefully, promising to keep in touch. Their friendship marked the beginning of a new chapter, one rooted in understanding, support, and shared purpose. The ripple effect. In the weeks and months that followed, Emma and James became advocates for mental health awareness. They appeared together at conferences, schools, and community events, spreading their message of compassion and resilience. Their story inspired countless people to reach out to others, whether through hugs, kind words, or simple acts of support. For Emma, the experience reinforced her belief in the power of connection. For James, it was a reminder that even in the toughest moments, there is always hope. Together, they proved that sometimes the smallest gestures, like a hug, can spark the greatest transformations. And so, what had begun as an impulsive act of kindness evolved into a lifelong bond, leaving a lasting legacy of love and understanding in its wake. The charity event in London had been a turning point for both Emma and James. Their stories of courage, vulnerability, and connection resonated deeply with the audience, sparking conversations that continued long after the event ended. For Emma, it was a reminder of how one small act could ripple outward, touching lives far beyond what she'd imagined. For James, it was the start of a journey toward healing, one he no longer had to walk alone. In the weeks that followed, their friendship grew stronger. They stayed in touch through phone calls, emails, and occasional visits whenever Emma traveled back to London. Each conversation brought them closer as they shared more about their lives, dreams, and struggles. Though they came from different worlds, Emma, a free-spirited traveler, and James, a disciplined soldier, they found common ground in their shared values of kindness, empathy, and resilience. A shared mission. Inspired by the impact of their story, Emma and James decided to collaborate on a project aimed at promoting mental health awareness and emotional well-being. They named it Beneath the Uniform, a platform designed to break down barriers and encourage open conversations about mental health among soldiers, veterans, and civilians alike. Emma took charge of organizing events, writing articles, and creating social media content to spread their message. She believed that storytelling was a powerful tool, and she worked tirelessly to collect personal accounts from people who had experienced similar struggles. Her goal was simple: to remind everyone that they weren't alone. James, on the other hand, focused on reaching out to fellow soldiers. He visited military bases, spoke at conferences, and participated in workshops where he shared his own experiences openly. At first, some of his colleagues were hesitant to open up, fearing judgment or weakness. But James's honesty and vulnerability encouraged others to follow suit. Slowly but surely, the walls began to crumble. Together, they created resources like online support groups, counseling services, and educational materials tailored specifically for those in high-pressure roles. Their efforts didn't just benefit soldiers. They inspired ordinary people to check in on their loved ones, practice active listening, and prioritize mental health. Walking through Hyde Park. One sunny afternoon, Emma returned to London for another round of meetings and events. This time, however, she made sure to carve out some personal time with James. After a busy morning of interviews and presentations, they decided to take a break and go for a walk through Hyde Park, a place neither of them had explored together before. As they strolled along the winding paths, surrounded by lush greenery and the sound of birds chirping, they reflected on how far they'd come since that fateful day outside Buckingham Palace. "You know," Emma said, breaking the comfortable silence, "I never thought something so small, a hug, could lead to all of this." James nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Me neither. I spent so much time trying to be strong, to keep everything bottled up inside. Your hug reminded me that it's okay to feel, to let people in." Emma smiled softly, "And your response reminded me that even the toughest people have hearts that need care. We're all human, no matter what we wear or do." They paused near a bench overlooking Serpentine Lake. Ducks paddled lazily across the water, and children laughed as they chased each other on the grass nearby. The peacefulness of the scene felt like a metaphor for the changes they'd helped bring about, a calm after the storm. "I used to think my role as a guard was all about discipline and duty," James admitted. "But now I see it differently. It's not just about standing tall. It's about being there for others too. About showing compassion, even when it's hard." Emma nodded. "That's exactly why I travel. To connect with people, to understand their stories, and to remind myself that we're all connected in ways we don't always realize." Facing challenges together. Of course, their journey wasn't without challenges. Not everyone supported their mission. Some critics argued that soldiers should focus solely on their duties rather than discussing emotions. Others dismissed their efforts as mere publicity stunts, accusing them of seeking fame instead of genuine change. But Emma and James refused to let negativity deter them. They knew the work they were doing mattered, not because of recognition, but because it saved lives. Every message they received from someone saying, "Thank you for reminding me I'm not alone," fueled their determination to keep going. James often reminded himself of Daniel during tough times. He imagined his brother smiling down at him, proud of the way he was using his pain to help others. Emma, too, drew strength from the countless stories she encountered. Stories of resilience, hope, and transformation. A global movement. Over time, Beneath the Uniform gained international attention. Schools incorporated its teachings into their curriculums, businesses held workshops on empathy and leadership, and governments began implementing policies to better support mental health initiatives within the military. What had started as a spontaneous hug between a tourist and a guard had blossomed into a global movement. Emma and James traveled to different countries, sharing their story and meeting individuals who had been inspired by their work. In Canada, Emma reunited with old friends and introduced James to her family, who welcomed him warmly. In the UK, James showed Emma around landmarks she hadn't seen during her previous visits, including his hometown, where she met his parents and siblings. Through these experiences, they realized how interconnected the world truly was. People everywhere faced similar struggles: loneliness, grief, fear, but they also shared the same hopes for love, understanding, and belonging. Looking ahead, as months turned into years, Emma and James continued to grow personally and professionally. Emma published a book titled Hugs Across Borders, chronicling her travels and the lessons she'd learned along the way. It became a bestseller, with readers praising its authenticity and heartwarming message. James, meanwhile, transitioned into a leadership role within the British Army, focusing on developing programs to support soldiers' mental health. His superiors recognized his dedication and appointed him as an advocate for change within the institution. Though he still wore his uniform proudly, he carried himself differently now, with warmth and openness that inspired those around him. Despite their busy schedules, Emma and James made time for each other. Whether it was a quick coffee catch-up during Emma's trips to London or video calls late at night when they were apart, their bond remained strong. They celebrated milestones together, the launch of new projects, the birthdays of friends and family, and quiet moments of gratitude for the life they'd built. A lasting legacy. Years later, when people spoke of Emma and James, they didn't just remember the hug. They remembered the ripple effect it created, a wave of kindness that swept across continents, uniting strangers and reminding them of their shared humanity. Statues were erected in parks honoring unsung heroes. Plaques were placed near Buckingham Palace commemorating the day everything changed, and schools taught students about the power of empathy. For Emma, the legacy was proof that one person could make a difference. For James, it was a testament to the fact that even in the most rigid systems, there was room for compassion. Together, they proved that acts of kindness, no matter how small, could spark revolutions of the heart. As they walked side by side through Hyde Park on that final visit, Emma turned to James and asked, "Do you ever wonder if we'll inspire someone else today?" James chuckled. "Probably. But honestly, I think we already have." And with that, they continued their journey, not as a tourist and a guard, but as two people united by a shared purpose, leaving behind a trail of hope and healing wherever they went.